All right. Okay. Welcome everybody to our class, which is learning Torah right here from the holy city of Tzfat. And okay, today we have really a very special subject. I should put this on, right? When people would come to Lubavitch Rebbe, there's something, a very, very special thing called Yechidus. Yechidus was a private meeting. Now, people would spend years, at least with the altar of the first Chabad Rebbe, preparing their soul to receive the message of the Rebbe. The Rebbe, every generation has, if you want to call it a master, has somebody like Moses. Moses says that I will establish for you a prophet like me, which is a big statement, a prophet like Moses. And they have an extraordinary ability, not only from a perspective of prophecy, but also from the perspective of wisdom. Exceedingly intelligent. The Rebbe was knowledgeable in every single field. And so therefore, what they can give us is the truth. Really, literally in every generation, there's one person that can give you the truth. There's a lot of people that can give you what they heard from their ancestors, listen, I'm not putting anyone down, but there's 2 billion Christians. Somebody's got to be wrong, you know what I mean? 1.9 billion Muslims, 4 billion Christians. Someone's making a mistake because their stories are a little bit different. There's only one person in a generation who actually, even within Judaism, you got different streams. I'm not saying those that disagree with halacha. We all agree with halacha, but what's the most important mitzvah? What's the most important thing to be focused on, right? So if you actually think about it, as Rabbi Kiva says, "V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha," love your friend as yourself. Well, getting that right and not thinking, well, God just wants to be worshipped, right? There are nuances here, and it's the Rebbe, the generation, that can really give you the nuances. Not only can he give you the nuances, but it's actually, like we were saying the other day, it's multifaceted because there are many different aspects of life. Somebody once asked the previous Rebbe, he said, what is the mitzvah that is most which actually, there are two separate things that they asked the previous Rebbe, both of them very profound. They said, which political system is closest to Judaism? And he said, the good in each one of them. Also, which religion is closest to Judaism? The good in each one of them. So, goodness is like a universal concept that applies differently in different situations. Because goodness between a husband and a wife and a husband, between a parent and a child to a parent, between people in a society, between, let's say, the government to its people, the people to its government, between an employee and an employer, between you and God. Goodness has a different connotation in each one of its contexts. Furthermore, we believe that God is infinite because God is infinite, so therefore God can constantly upgrade goodness itself. So as good as you are today, you can even become more sensitive, kinder, better tomorrow. So we're dealing with a very interesting dynamic because most philosophies will say, okay, we got the truth, here's the package, let's say 10, 20, or 30 ideas, and if you do this, you get to heaven, if you don't, you go to hell. But it's not so simple, because if you're looking at goodness depends on the situation, depends what you're dealing with, and furthermore, can also be infinite. Right? So you're dealing with a much larger picture than just give me this little philosophy. There was a group of Israeli travelers. Israelis get all over the world, and they ended up some jungle in South America. So the guy says, listen, I want to show you something. He takes them to like a room that was their, I guess, synagogue. And he had there like a aron, like a little, I wouldn't say ark, but a little cabinet. They opened the cabinet, and he saw in Hebrew, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Their whole religion was they had this teaching. He says, now you guys got more than this teaching. Go do it. So there's so many, the story with the Dalai Lama, that there was a person that came to the Dalai Lama and said, many times this happened, but anyway, the Dalai Lama asked him, okay, what is your faith? So he says, well, I'm Jewish, but I'm interested in Buddhism or whatever. He says, no, every religion is an imitation of Judaism. He says, why get... The Dalai Lama said that, yes. He says, why get the imitation if you can go to the original? So he said, well, I'm a Jewish, I was in Israel. He says, go back and study Torah with an open heart. And he went back, he studied Torah with an open heart, and because it's the truth. Every religion really is an imitation of Judaism. We were talking about before Hinduism, even Hinduism that has many gods, but they'll say, if you know that really we believe there's one God. I know a guy that he adopted children from India, and they were discussing the idea of the Jewish view that there's one God. He was like, wow, that's amazing. He said, what's so amazing about it? He says, by us, we believe there's one God, but we talk about all these different idols because we don't think people have the capacity to understand this notion of oneness. Only when they get to a certain level, they say, actually, it's all from one God. But you Jewish people, you're teaching your children that there's one God. Anyway, and there's a certain truth to that because a Jew has a soul which comes from the essence of God, and the essence of God, there's oneness. So I want to focus on a very interesting thing, which is that, many of us are not aware, but are you going into the shade there?
No, we're kind of like on a slant. Hello.
Okay.
I think this will work. I'll just kind of tilt my head.
Okay, good stuff. So many of us are not aware that the Avraham Avinu, Abraham, our ancestor Abraham, was a very great Kabbalist. And I mentioned this the other day that he wrote a book called Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah has 32 short paragraphs, and it has the essence of the entire Kabbalah. It's amazing, amazing, amazing stuff. There's a book by Aryeh Kaplan, Sefer Yetzirah. It's very deep stuff. Not way beyond my pay grade. Some of the stuff is explained by Hasidus. One of the ideas we mentioned the other day is called Oshon. Oshon is made from Olam, Shana, Nefesh, that everything's made up of time, space, soul. There are dimensions. We're in a time, space, soul dimension. Am I talking too fast? All good? Great. Okay. It works out better sometimes when you talk fast because other times you put people to sleep, so talking fast could be good. So another idea that it says that Abraham either wrote 400 books or 400 chapters on idol worship. Now that's a little bit crazy. Like, why is Abraham writing books on idol worship, right? He should be writing books on the one God. But in fact, Abraham wrote 400 books on ego. And it's very interesting because if you look at the East, it says that Abraham sent his sons to the East, and what happened there was that they actually, their whole philosophy, certainly Buddhism, is about trying to get rid of the ego. So it makes sense that a lot of these ideas, it says he sent them with false names of God, so they didn't get the full idea, but if you look at some of the mysticism of the East and look at some of the Jewish mysticism, you have a lot of similarities. Now, the subject of the ego is a very interesting subject because, in fact, it says that the person that has an ego, God says, I can't handle this guy. Me and this guy, we can't get along. Now, it says that God can get along with a person that's worshiping idols, which there's 50 commandments not to worship idols in the Torah. He can get along with that guy as long as he's humble. So you're telling me I could be a Torah scholar, I could be doing every single mitzvah. I got one little problem. I think that I am God. The other guy, he's worshiping a cow, as they have unfortunately in India. I don't know what he's doing in his life, but he's humble. He doesn't think that he's God. He thinks that there's something higher than him. He's just a little schmo going around this world. So God says, you that know so much, you're doing my will and everything, you I can't handle. You, they're going clearly against what I say, even to the Gentiles, you I can handle. Interesting. So what's the deal with ego? And then if you ask yourself another question, who created the ego? God. So are we meant to have the ego? Are we not meant to have the ego? And this is a very big subject in life. The answer to the subject is very, 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 very simple and very, very, very important. And it goes like this. What about fire? Fire is a very destructive force. You take a fire, God forbid, it burns down a building. There are a lot of fires that are going on in the world. There are wars. Ukraine, they're sending, God forbid, whatever, Russia's sending bombs. Russia's got to stop what they're doing. It's insane. They're killing their own people. They've killed more of their own people than anything else just because. And where does it all come from? It comes from the ego. Why? Because I can't accept loss. Now, Pharaoh was the ultimate example of ego. Part of what the Jewish people did in this world was there were 288 sparks. And these 288 sparks of, if you want to call it ego, came into the world. It became the fundamental fabric of the material world. And the Jewish people had to redeem these sparks. While we were in Egypt, we redeemed 244 sparks. And the rest of the time, we redeemed the 44 sparks. We went around the world. Part of our job was actually to use the culture. Let's say we went to Africa. I was actually in Africa. There was a place in Africa called the Jerusalem of Africa. was a place called Otzorn. Otzorn is a very, very interesting town. What was Otzorn famous for? It was famous for its ostriches. Ostriches like the high climate and the heat. I'll tell you a funny story. This guy in Otzorn, the head of the community, he told me, so Otzorn, for whatever reason, didn't have a basic forest. They didn't have a cemetery. So whenever they would have to bury the Jewish people, they would take a ride, which was about an hour and a half away, to Cape Town. So one day, the black worker gets in, he was tired, so he decided he'll go to sleep next to, so the body, it's like a hearse, so there's a lot of room there. So the body was over here, the worker was over here, going to sleep on the way to the cemetery, and as the man in the cemetery opens up, suddenly the body starts to move. So he got a little bit of a fright. Anyway, Otzorn was a very special place, and in fact, they translated a siddur into Afrikaans. Anybody know what Afrikaans is? Afrikaans is a Dutch language. The people that settled South Africa, in fact, was the Dutch East Indies Company, which, by the way, was owned by the Jews, and they settled the continent, whatever, and the Dutch, mainly the settlers, the non-Jews, they settled this country, and they developed their own language. Of course, there were the Boer Wars, there were wars between the English and the Dutch, the whole story. But the point is that the language of the country for a while was not English, but mainly was this language called Afrikaans. And I actually saw it, a siddur that was written in Afrikaans. So this is what we were meant to do, and we did around the world, is we went to different countries, and we were born in those countries. You're an American Yid. I mean, here you're a Holy of Holies. You're from Israel, right? You're from California. You're from New York. You're from, where are you from?
Colorado.
Colorado. I'm from Kansas City, believe it or not. I once went to a Jew in the JCC. I was shaking the lulav and Esther. He was a Jew from Russia. He did not believe that I came from Kansas City. I had to pull out my my license, and show him that I am from Kansas. He couldn't think that a guy like me, actually comes from America. But the point is that I do come from America, and God decided literally that we would go all over the country. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, that there's this nation. We're basically a family. We come from Avraham Avinu. We were we were educated in Israel for 2,000 years. We had a value system, and then we were sent to the whole world. There was a Russian writer, I'd like to mention this. There are many, many great literary Russian writers, and he wrote that if you're looking for the truth and you see a Jew, you see everything. If you're not looking for the truth and you see a Jew, you see nothing. So why did God send us to the world? We are called B'nai B'chai Yisrael, the firstborn son, Israel, because if you want people to change, they have to have a role model. The firstborn son, you're the firstborn in your family, right? Any other you're firstborn? Firstborn, the firstborn, they get the extra whip. Yeah, you got the extra whip?
Yeah, but then your parents apologize to you when you're an adult.
That usually does not happen, trust me.
Finally,
Right, okay, you're very lucky. You're very lucky. In fact, it's interesting because a psychologist once told me this. She told me that we put most of our expectation on our firstborn. Now, why do we do that? It's not a conscious thing, it's a subconscious thing. We do that because God wanted there to be a role model in the family. If you're a firstborn, according to Judaism, according to Jewish mysticism, there's a mitzvah in the Torah. It says, you have to honor your father and mother. And basically, every time it says S in the Torah, it teaches us something extra. It teaches us to honor the firstborn because the spirit of the father comes through the firstborn son. And so he is the one that has the spirit of the father, and I see it clearly in my own family. There's certain thing, it's a very, very big problem that we have in modern society, and it's called feminism. Now, feminism did a lot of good in terms of opening up the society, which is a good thing. Women should obviously have freedom of conscience. However, it did a lot of bad, and one of the worst things that it did is it devalued the male. The value of each individual stands because God gave them a special value. And the valuing of the male is not good for women because most women certainly want to get married and they don't want to marry a woman, they want to marry a man. They don't want to marry a feminine, a man who's a woman, they want to marry a man who's a man. In fact, if you look at statistics, I'm not saying from the Torah, just regular statistics, what are the two things that women most want from men they want somebody that's moral and somebody that's strong. So a woman wants to feel that she can look up to as well as rely upon the man. Am I right? That's what they're looking for. They're looking for somebody that I can look up to and rely. But what did I get? I was brought up in America, in Kansas City. I went to a secular Jewish day school. So I was brought up in the Mishigas. So what was the subconscious message, which is the main message that was given? Men should not be men. But it's not true. It's not what men want. It's not what women want. Because men want to be men and women want to be men. Sorry, women want to be women. Sorry, women want, before the brainwashing, but the truth is, by the nature, a woman wants to be treated like a woman, and a man wants to be treated like a man. So if you have two people, a man and woman get together, and the man knows how to treat a woman like a woman, make her feel special, right? Cherished and unique and awesome, as she is and as she should be, right? Women can do things that men can't do, least of not, of course, have children, which a man can't do. And I have a friend, he's a very smart guy. So he said, without giving away too much, he said, listen, I wanted children. I knew I couldn't have that on my own, you know? So he got married, smart guy. Thank God he's got children. The next thing is that a woman would like to respect her husband. She would like to feel proud of her husband. Am I correct? Woman wants to feel proud of her husband. She wants to be able to look up to her husband. So in a way, and this is really the key, and this relates to our whole subject of ego. It's very, very critical, very important. When the definition of being a man, of let's say power, is arrogance, is what we call, I have a little thing, I do a daily, the truth. I have a friend of mine, very smart guy. He's a Christian guy he's from Switzerland. Thank God he supports the poor of Tzfat. And I love speaking to him every day. It's very important actually to speak to people that are not in your circle. Because there are many people, even if they're opposite your circle, as long as they have the openness of discussion, it's very important to talk to other people. Because if you don't, I have another friend who quote unquote is liberal, psychiatrist, great guy, and I love speaking to him. You know what? It's important for him to hear me and it's important for me to hear him. We have to be able to converse with one another, and because none of us are 100% right, we have to have dialogue, it's very, very, very important. So this guy, literally 3 times a week, we have a great conversation and I gain a lot of insight. And the truth is we're much more similar than we're different. You know, we're both looking for God, we're both spiritual, but he brings a certain element. He's more in the world than I am. You know, he's an engineer in a company in Switzerland, so it's nice, you know. So in any event, one of the things that he said to me, oh man, slipped my mind. What was I going to say? How did I get on to him?
Engineer from Switzerland. He helps people in Tzfat.
Before that. Feminism, right. Be a male, right.
Talk to other people, that'll be smart because he got married because he wanted to have a kid.
Okay. Huh? Tell me, I was saying that guy told me something.
How profound could it be if it's...
Well, there's a lot of profound things coming out. You can forget one or two. So in any event, to put, if I remember it, I can give it to you. Maybe it will come back to me. But the main point that I'm trying to bring out is this idea, which is that this concept of, right, now I remember. Thank God, it came back to me. So he gave me this idea. He said people are looking for the truth. So the truth is, so I said, because I was putting out a daily video, like it's just like a one line, because of course our attention span, because I do a little bit on YouTube, and I realize most people don't watch beyond a minute. So 1 minute is, you know, YouTube short, your Twitters and things like that. So I started shifting. I used to do a daily video, and then my title of my video today, and I'm getting a lot of hits on that, is called The Truth. One thing, all I'm trying to tell you is the truth. Thank God I discovered the truth a while ago. So, you know, when you discover the truth, you are liable. The previous Rebbe says something very, very important. He says, in everything good, there's bad. There's no such thing as good without bad and bad without good. So what's the bad of good? Complacency. Because when things are not good, you can be energized by the fact that things are not good. So at least you're not complacent. When things are good, you have, thank God, you're okay physically and spiritually as well. So you can become complacent and not care enough about everybody else that even spiritually doesn't. Maybe physically they're okay, but spiritually they're not okay. Spiritually they're in that desert. And I can say it for myself, you know, when I was kind of secular and looking for the truth, it was not a comfortable reality to be in. And and thank God having found the truth, but then you can get comfortable. So comfort is a great danger, right? And that's why one of the most important things in life is to make yourself uncomfortable. You should be comfortable and make yourself uncomfortable. You shouldn't be uncomfortable from the outside. You should be uncomfortable from the inside. For example, we have to know that life is not okay. Why? Because we don't have the Rebbe in front of us. We don't have the tzaddikim. There are a lot of misery and death in the world. Life is not okay. And that should bother us. We shouldn't be so comfortable to feel that we are okay. Being okay is not okay. And it's very important. I'll mention something else. I like to call it a Hasidic commercial, which is the balancing of our emotions and cognizance. I think we spoke about this on Shabbos. There are certain things that we have to exist within the diamond. Imagine life as a diamond. On the top of the diamond is being high, being happy. On the bottom is being sad, being miserable. On the right of the diamond is being comfortable, being safe, not being afraid. On the left of the diamond is fear, anxiety, and panic. Okay, so the top is where you're feeling good. The bottom is where you're feeling, let's say, sad. The right is where you're feeling safe. And the left is where you're feeling unsafe. So you would say, what's the best? Well, the best is to feel happy and safe, this over here. But what would actually happen if you feel happy and safe? You'll be a dumb American, and I'm an American, so I can say that. Right, there's this lady, she came from South Africa. I don't want to call her a maid, but she was a helper. A friend of mine, he brought his helper from South Africa, and she was in America. Very, very good guy. He had a company there, and obviously she was very happy to be there. She used to tell, again, I don't like labeling, and there's no such thing as skin color making an identity, because it's just a skin color, where our identity is our heart, right? Martin Luther King said, I value the day that people, I don't remember if my quote is exactly right, I value the day you're not judged by the color of skin, by the color of your heart. So your heart is what makes who you are, or your intelligence, well, not your intelligence, your ideology, your ideas. But be that as it may, she would tell the black people in Texas, she would say, what the heck are you doing? Go get yourself a degree. Like, because I lived in South Africa. My daughter once gave a lecture. She said, you don't know what it means for somebody to live. You know, you lived in India. You know what it is for them to get themselves out of their circumstances and it's almost impossible. It's very difficult. In America, people are given so much opportunity. I mean, crying out loud, there was affirmative action. You'd have more opportunity than the native people of the country or the people that are there. So, but the thing is, this other guy, a friend of mine, a professor in South Africa, he had a group of professors that came to his university, and they were very compassionate, coming from America, and it was basically, again, I don't want to label color of skin, but black kids going there. They were like, oh, the feeling's so bad. So this guy, he actually was from Iran, Jewish guy from Iran. He said to them, listen, you're making a big mistake, because everybody needs to have drive in life. Okay, where they came from wasn't so good, but now they're driven, right? Very important. So if you're on that line, that right-hand line between comfort and pleasure, it's not a healthy situation. Smack in the middle, right between too happy and too sad, right between too comfortable and too uncomfortable, that's where you're going to be the best. Or you could say a little bit to the right? A little bit towards the side of happiness and towards the side of safety. But you cannot feel in life too happy and too safe, because that's actually what manic depressive is. What is a manic? He thinks it's like drugs. Everybody's trying to get onto a high. But meanwhile, what are you doing for the world? Nothing. Why? Because you're feeling good. That's why I try to stay away from drugs and marijuana and because I don't want to get high from a substance. I want to get high from my own feelings. I want to be able to control my emotions. I want to know when I'm feeling sad, and I want to be able to pick myself up. And if I'm too high, and I can tell when I'm too high because I go a little illusional, I want to be able to put myself down. I want to be able to control my emotions. And there are times in my life, I went through a lot of anxiety, God forbid, on anyone, and there were times in my life through different processes and machines, I was able to totally get rid of the anxiety, but I never do that. I always make sure I have some anxiety in life, because if you have too little anxiety, you become a couch potato. I don't want to become a couch potato. You know what I mean? There's enough couches and enough potatoes in the world. I don't want to be one of them. And so this is the balance. So basically you have to live within the mess. If you're not living within a mess, you're not living. If there's not a fire, I was saying before, You know, that fire is a very good example for ego. Why? Because the ego is this constant fire that's going on. Now, what happens to a fire that's unchecked? It burns everything down. But what happens to a fire that's like checked? All our food comes from that. You know, you create a car. Everything is coming from fire and energy. You know, so again, energy unchecked, God forbid. Energy directed, amazing. Another great example of this is a light bulb. A light bulb gives off light. But make a laser beam that's also made out of light, unbelievable. You create miracles. You get rid of a cataract. You can do amazing things. So the ego is not the problem. Energy is not the problem. And this is a very great teaching of Hasidus, which is that we have to have an animal inside of us. We have to have an ego. In fact, we're taught that basically, hello, Tanya, welcome.
Sorry that there was echo.
No problem.
I was hearing in the middle.
No problem. No problem. We're taught that ego. Huh? Animal. Thank you. Yes. So we're taught that there are two kinds of animals, two kinds of Yetzer that we are. One is called the shar, the ox. You know, you have certain personalities. I have a friend of mine that this guy's a wild child. You know, he always was. He got kicked out of every school, right? And his parents had a lot of money. They could have bought the schools. He had even, oh, sorry about that. And even as a young man, he's a little bit wild. No question about it. Like ADD on steroids. But at the same time, he's a guy that does tremendous chesed, tremendous kindness. A friend of mine, he's a very big psychiatrist, very great psychiatrist, he spoke about Schindler. So Schindler was a wild maniac. He was a womanizer, but when push came to shove, he used his craziness to be able to he saved 1,000 people. He went into the lion's den. They would have killed him in a second for what he did. And how many Germans? I mean, we shouldn't think that there were no good Germans. The story that I saw, shame, poor guy, this kid, I don't want to even go through it. He watched his whole town being murdered, 5-year-old child. And then, this amazing child, amazing mind, he said to himself, okay, are people good or are they bad, right? So he decided that some people are good and some people are bad. So he's a 5-year-old kid. He survived the Holocaust by going to the German women, and they were like in a village wherever they were, and asking for food. And I personally met this guy, 90 years old, who survived, and he was in Germany, in a town. And I asked him, did they know you were Jewish? And he said they knew I was Jewish. So we shouldn't think that all Germans were evil. They were not all evil. Our mistake, the great tragedy of the West, which we're doing right now, is that the only person that understood who Hitler was Churchill. And Churchill was saying for 10 years, you got to get rid of this guy. I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but basically England had the power to get rid of him. This Treaty of Versailles, they weren't allowed to, they broke the treaty of the Germans. Only when the bombs were literally falling on Britain, and when did America get into the war? When the bombs literally fell on them. They didn't understand there was a war, they didn't understand evil before. They understood, but they didn't do anything. And make no mistake about it, it's happening right now. Iran wants to destroy the world. And nobody's, at least the powers of, let's say, Britain, America, Russia, they just have a death wish because they're actually helping these people. To Iran, Russia is a Christian country. They'll get rid of them. Not only that, they'll get rid of themselves, right? Because to them, it's just about blowing up the world. And if they die too, the Messiah is going to come. So it's all good. So God should dedicate this class to the destruction of Amalek. And that's really what this class is about, the destruction of Amalek. But what's interesting is that the destruction of Amalek is really the construction of the Jew. It says the fall of Damascus is the rise of Jerusalem. Now, what is ultimately Damascus? What does it represent? There was a dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. Nebuchadnezzar, as you know who Nebuchadnezzar was? How do you say it in English?
Nebuchadnezzar.
Yes.
Yeah, Nebuchadnezzar, yes.
Nebuchadnezzar.
There you go. We got the Ashkenazic, the English, and the Sephardic pronunciation of the Shmo. So this guy, this guy,
Temple, right?
yes, this guy Nebuchadnezzar was a real Shmo, and he. You want to get a drink or? You okay? You want to move here? Yeah. So Nebuchadnezzar. Yes, well, go get a drink. So Nebuchadnezzar was a very smart man. He was a very ruthless man, but he was a very smart man. And he, in fact, had an interesting policy because most people, their policy was, destroy the country. Nebuchadnezzar was a lot smarter than that. He basically, first of all, allowed a governor, a Jewish governor, but the Jewish people themselves fought between themselves. They killed the governor. Therefore, we have the fast of Gedalia, Shem Gedalia. But be that as it may, in fact, my birthday is on the 4th of Tishrei, and I want to tell you a little miracle that happened with me and the Rebbe. Amazing. And this is the story. So my grandfather, whose yard site was just this Shabbos, very, very special Yid. So just while I'm mentioning my grandfather, I mentioned a little story. Somebody told me this Shabbos, a beautiful story. My grandfather actually, thank God, was very wealthy. And he didn't look like a charitable person. But meanwhile, I just literally heard it. Most people don't know this.
It's okay, I can still hear you.
Most,
You invite him to come to the show.
so most people,
He's screaming, invite him
his
to
soul
the
is
show.
screaming, his soul is screaming. All of that.
Invited him?
No, but you're welcome to. Tell me as a personal invitation.
Tell him again.
Okay. So in any event, so my grandfather established what's called a gemach. A gemach is one of the biggest charities you can do. Is more than giving charity, is you can open up a free loan fund. Now, what do you do with a free loan fund? Is you allow people to take a loan. That way they're not embarrassed. Additionally, you don't harass them to get the loan back. So it's a double win. However, my grandfather didn't want that people should be embarrassed that if he gives them money and they don't give him back the money, then they'll be embarrassed to see him. So he gave all of the money. He ran a yeshiva. He gave all of the money to the treasurer of the yeshiva, and he says, you run the fund, and nobody should know that it's my money. So now there was a free loan fund as if it's a fund, but nobody knew whose fund it was, and therefore people weren't embarrassed. So it's a beautiful story with my grandfather. Why did I mention my grandfather? What was I saying? How did I get up before my grandfather? What was I saying? Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, so we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar. So this guy Nebuchadnezzar was very smart. He took the brightest people of the countries to him, and he used them as advisors. One of them was Daniel, who was a prophet. Now, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and in his dream he saw a statue. The statue was made out of 4 metals. The head was made out of gold. You ever heard this? The head made out of gold. The arms were made out of silver. The torso was made out of copper or brass, and the legs were made out of iron. Now the toes, some of the toes were made out of iron, and some of the toes, if you want, you can get water, you get a cup of water. Some of the toes were made out of iron, and some of them were made out of copper or brass. And then a stone came, Cheres is like clay, actually. Sorry, you're right. Some of them were made out of, no, not copper, you're right, thank you. They were made out of clay. Some of the toes were made out of iron, and some of them were made out of clay or hardened dirt. Yes, thank you, yes.
Ceramic.
Yeah, yes.
Christians try to...
No, we're not going there right now. So very, very good, very good. Thanks for reminding me. So then there, see, it worked out for a good reason. All came for the good. So then a stone came and it smashed the statue. And the statue turned to dust. Right? Imagine the statue, dust. And then a wind came and it blew away the dust, and the stone turned into a mountain. So, as kings do, he asked his wise men, what does it mean? So the wise men were not able to give him the interpretation. Maybe he dreamed the interpretation, but he knew that what they were saying were wrong, and he got very upset. He decided he's killing all his wise men. Kings are very impetuous. Sometimes they do things like this. So as the executioner came to Daniel, Daniel said to him, listen, tell the king he doesn't have to kill all the wise men. I am going to tell him what the meaning of this dream is. And this is what he said. He said, God is showing you the future. There's going to be 4 world powers. You are gold. He was very smart, and gold is a precious metal. The next power is going to be silver. That's the Persians. The Persians were quite smart too. Alexander the Great, generally speaking, was quite a benevolent empire. And the next power is going to be, not the next power. The Persians were not Alexander the Great. That was like the story of Shushan, the story of Hanukkah, the story of Purim. That's the story of Ahasuerus, right, the Persian Empire. The next empire after that was Greece. So these are nice kind of metals. They're a little bit, but the next one is iron. Iron's very tough. That is the exile of Rome. In fact, God showed Yaakov the future. And he showed each empire that would rise, whether it was like an eagle, whatever their symbol was. And so one rose, I don't know, Babylonia was like 70 years, Persia, how long? Maybe 70 years, Greece, maybe 200 years, whatever it was. And then when he saw Rome, this eagle started to go up and up and up. It's been 2,000 years. And he was like, oh my gosh, this is ever going to end? And God said, don't worry, it's going to end. And eventually, this is amazing, amazing stuff. There will be a tussle of power between the iron, that's the toes at the very end, between the iron and the cheres and the dirt, hardened dirt or the clay. Why? Because we see, when people are worried about Russia, Rabbi says, don't worry about Russia. Because everything's been predicted. Russia is not going to be a problem to the world. He said, worry about the Arabs. This was in the 60s. Nobody thought that there would be a problem. Meanwhile, with all their money and all their ancestral hate against the Jews, the jealousy because Yishmael was kicked out, so therefore, you see even in the Quran, they write that Yishmael was the one that was on the altar because there was this ancient jealousy. Unfortunately, as one Arab, I've mentioned this before, he was a former terrorist and he became a Christian, thank God. He told me, he said, imagine how Yishmael felt. We don't think about this, but he was a 13-year-old son. He thought he was going to be the heir and he got kicked out. Imagine how he felt about himself, unceremoniously sent out of the house. So they have all these issues that are going back. I'm not going to go into it, but even part of the issues that Arabs have with Arab women is all going back to this whole. It was 13. Oh, when he got kicked out, I think it was like. He was 27. Yeah, but he was kicked out. He was kicked out. He was kicked out earlier. He was kicked out when he was 13. Yeah, because he. Yeah, mainly because he was trying to kill him. He was pretending, he was throwing bows and arrows, shooting at him. He was saying, oh. Yeah, he was trying to kill him. So that's why Sarah got rid of him. But the point is that they have this, whenever I put this on YouTube and there's like, oh, what are you talking about? But no, it's fine. But the point is that it's sensitive subject. And in fact, I did a what's it called? I did a video once with this guy. He was a former terrorist. He wrote 2 books, The Mind of Terror and Once an Arafat Man. And I said, sorry for anything we did going back to your ancestor Abraham. And he cried. Very interesting. The guy wasn't just a weak guy. And he said, I could see how sincere you were. And to be perfectly frank, I wasn't that sincere, but I knew that they were suffering from this shame. And I wanted to help get over that shame. It's very interesting because it's a real thing which many people don't understand. People that carry shame, it's a great pain. There's like a pain in the heart that a person may have, and we become very sensitive to how people look at us. Anyway, I don't want to talk for too long, and there's a massive subject. We could talk for years on the subject, so I want to bring out the main point. The main point is all these empires are built on one thing, the desire for power and money. That's what's driving them. What is Mashiach? Mashiach is the desire for peace and love. These 2 clashes of civilizations are occurring. And as the Jewish people, educated by God, go into the world, it made the world have to examine itself. It gave the world role models. And in fact, after 2 world wars, when you actually think about this, there's something called game theory. Anybody heard of game theory? Game theory is a very, very important idea. It was made by von Neumann. Von Neumann's a great genius. He made the computer, he made algorithms, helped invent the bomb, as well as he made game theory. Now, game theory is a very simple idea, which is basically people will kill each other until they start figuring out that it's better to live together. That's pretty much been human history. And so the thing is, it takes a long time for people to realize that. And that's all the ego. Because anytime a person has an addiction, when does a person change? They don't change when their mind tells them to change. They change when their heart tells them to change. And so they actually have to hit rock bottom. What happens when they hit rock bottom? God forbid the person's eating out of the garbage can. So he suddenly, the shame of his reality is worse than the pleasure of it. Right? So something has to happen because pleasure was the driving force. And then the shame becomes the change. But if he forgets, and there's a book written by the Mittler Rebbe called I translated it, it's called Pakeach Ivrim, Overcoming Addictions. And it's a book that was written by a Rebbe for a Jewish alcoholic. And the main message there is never forget the shame. Very powerful. And any of us, if we've ever done something stupid that we want to stop doing, every day remind yourself of the stupidity of what you did. Because if you forget that stupidity, you're probably going to do it again. Because there's some kind of desire within you for that thing, right? That's why people will relapse, because now that they're okay, there's something in them that's attracting them to that thing, right? So it's natural to have a desire for, one of the greatest rabbis and people on addiction is Rabbi Twersky. He brought the whole 12-step program into one of the major people of bringing 12-step program to addiction. So basically he says we're all addicts, we're all addicted, we all like pleasure, right? So the thing is that to change, you have to remember the shame. Now, that's an important thing. It's a side note. So if we put the mix of all these things that we discussed into the puzzle, what do we come away with? Really, it would take many, many, many classes to unpack all these ideas that we said. But the idea is that ultimately, the ego, the pride is not the problem. The problem is not knowing what to be proud about. A Jew, Hashem clearly says this through the prophecy. He says the rich person shouldn't pride himself in wealth, and the smart person shouldn't pride himself in wisdom. And he says the strong person shouldn't pride himself in strength. But bezois, in this you should pride yourself. Yodeya oisi, in the fact that you know me. Pride yourself in the fact that I'm a Jew. In fact, there was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe who, when the Yetzer Hara would come to him and try to convince him to sin, he would say, "What? You want me to sin? I'm a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. You got the wrong guy. You don't know who you're talking to." So, in other words, if a person doesn't have pride, we speak about Go'in Yaakov, the pride, and a big problem that we have here in Israel, in fact, it's the source of all our problems, is we're not arrogant about our Judaism. We are the most special nation in human history. God gave us the Torah. If there's anything good in this world, it came from God through us to the world. That's something to be proud about. We should be proud of our identity, of who we are and what we have to share. And when we're proud about that we don't let somebody mess with us. But, this is very much what the enemy has done, is made us question our own right to exist. And that's what we're seeing in the Western world, that we should be proud. I'm an American. I'm a proud American because, it's very easy to condemn a person or a group for a sin because there is no man that hasn't sinned. But let's look at the package. Let's look at who's condemning us. Saudi Arabia, a tyranny of tyrannies. Who's condemning us? Turkey, the guy represses so many people, kills so many people. You're condemned. That's, when people condemn you, it's actually the greatest honor in the world. When Hitler condemns you, you should be very proud of yourself. And when he gives you a reward, you should probably kill yourself. Because that's yeah, exactly, in Israel. Exactly, and we are the ones that are helping everybody else. So it's very interesting, President Reagan, who was from the best United States presidents, at least in our times, his final speech was very interesting. It was like, whatever, he was speaking about the good, and he says, there's one thing I worry about, and he was right. He says, I'm worried about American children not being proud to be American. He says, you should ask your parents, Who are the forefathers of America? You know, when I grew up, we were proud of George Washington. We were proud of Thomas Jefferson. We were proud of the American Constitution. It's not perfect, but it's a heck of a lot better than, I don't know, than Russia's, you know, constitution. So it's very easy for Russia to condemn America. But let's look at the whole package. What's America doing for the world? How much charity is it giving? How much freedom does it give to its citizens? And what is Russia doing for the world, right? How much chaos have they sown in the world? So let's look at things in comparison to things. Look at, you know, Islam is, I have a friend that comes from an Islamic country. All they speak about is the evil of Britain and America. But what about you? Tyranny of tyrannies. All your people are coming to these countries. So your countries can't be that well off. So when you're comparing the facts, apples to apples, then we begin to see the truth that these countries, based on biblical systems, which are not perfect, but are infinitely better than the other countries around, including Israel, is infinitely better than all the tyrannies that surround us, islands of oceans of darkness, and we're an island of light in that ocean. Amen. And once you understand that, you know how to behave. Oh, the guy's going to condemn you. Okay, thank you very much. Actually, that's an honor. You've just respected me. And in general, people only condemn you if they're jealous of you, right? We don't see bad in someone else unless we're jealous of them. Okay? If you want to educate someone, we find, of course, there's a mitzvah to educate. But when you're educating someone like a parent to the child, you don't put them down. You say, oh, this is a better thing. You're trying to always, you give them the cushion to elevate. When somebody's putting you down, my grandfather, who I mentioned, he had a radio show. And somebody once called him up. She wanted him to make a donation. So he went to her house, and he said, why are you making a donation? She said, when most rabbis talk, they're going like this. But when you talk, you're going like this. So when the Rebbe spoke to us, the Rebbe knew better than me and you right from wrong. But how did he go? He went like this. He was elevating us. So the point of life is that we need to be very proud of who we are. We need to be proud of the goodness that we are. Now at the same time, in Kedusha, yes, in holiness. Yes, correct. At the same time, yes, exactly. At the same time, we also have to acknowledge the evil that we have. And that's the difference between being healthy pride and unhealthy pride. Unhealthy pride is, I am good, I am the best, we are the best, and everyone else is whatever. You know, depending on your philosophy, radical Islam, we got to kill them, maybe radical Christian, we got to convert them, you know, whatever the philosophy is. But in Judaism, we say, this way is good, and I am good because I'm part of this way. And at the same time, I do have bad in me. I do have a Yetzer Hara in me. I do have parts which are not okay. I will always have to improve myself. I'm never perfect. I always have to improve. But as a general system, there's no question in my mind, and I've read a lot. I literally was searching for the truth, and I read all the different faiths and all the philosophies. There is no system which is really, if I can say, perfect besides Judaism, but not just Judaism and Jewish mysticism with Hasidus, particularly Chabad Hasidus, because it says to you, it's an infinite journey. And there's no way, even Buddhism and all their great stuff within it, all of them have a limit, right? They're all limited. But in Jewish mysticism, it says, listen, buddy, this is infinite. A guy became about Shuvah, he came to Rebbe, he says, Rebbe, before I was a chassid, I wasn't complete. Now that I'm a chassid, I'm complete. The Rebbe said to him, complete is not a chassid, and a chassid is not complete. So we have to know that we are part of infinity, which is better than everything else. But at the same time, infinity has come to us. We are not the creators of this infinity. It's blessing us by giving us it. We are not it. I was in this rehab. It was a Christian rehab, very special place. This billionaire, he decided to go back. He was originally a pastor, and then he had an addiction, and then he became wealthy, and then he decided to go back to being a pastor. So he created a village, a beautiful town, and anybody in America could get a job. In fact, judges would say, hey, you go to jail, or you can go to this, get a job in this place, which is obviously a better option. They would give people, they had anyway, it was a Christian kind of place, but they made kosher food. It was a big company, so I used to go for the kosher food. So this guy once asked me about a man being God. So I said, listen to him. Listen, man can't be God, but God can become, but God can be man. In other words, God can descend into us. We can't become God, but a God can, he's all powerful. If he wants to descend, he wants to put a spirit in man, he can do that. So the point is that we acknowledge the limitations of who I am. As a human being, I am definitely flawed, and I will always have to grow. But at the same time, God is infinite, and He always is going to help me, and the wisdom that I have is coming from Him. So therefore, the ultimate humility is the ultimate strength. Because the ultimate humility is acknowledging that my power and my knowledge is God's. And therefore, it's the ultimate strength at the same time. If it's about me, ultimately, ego is very insecure. Fortunately, Islam is very insecure. They have all these things, which is if there's a contradiction in this book, Islam is not true. In fact, somebody told me that the reason that Islam doesn't want Jews praying on the Temple Mount is they say if the Jews pray on the Temple Mount, Islam is not true. In fact, why Iran is so against Israel is because Iran believes, or the Shiites, that if Israel becomes a nation again, Islam is not true. That's why they'll never refer to Israel as a nation. They always call it a Zionist entity. So Islam is very insecure if it has all these things. Judaism doesn't say if this happens, Judaism isn't true. Not once. Because it's quite...
You put the Kadosh Baruch Hu in the center.
Right, right.
If you put the Kadosh Baruch Hu, you're not inside. It's only the Kadosh Baruch Hu.
Right. So yeah, that's the whole idea of Judaism. So the point is that we have to have this knowledge of where our wisdom, where our truth is coming from, where our help is coming from. So in that way, your arrogance is not arrogance, it's actually confidence. There's a very big difference between confidence and arrogance. Arrogance is the need to be better than someone. Confidence is the certainty in the path that I am choosing. A doctor can be arrogant or confident. Arrogant means I'm better than you. Confident means I know exactly what you need to do and you need to do this. I have a friend, her daughter is a doctor, she's a hospitalist, and she's Israeli as well. So she doesn't take shtick from her patients. Like she'll shout at you, gotta be doing this. You know, most Americans, she's like, why haven't you eating healthy, right? She's confident, she knows what she's saying is true, right? So confidence comes with a lot of power. Arrogance comes with a lot of insecurity. Yep. And so therefore we have to be confident. And if you don't know what to do, you have to have a mashpia. Go get confident. Go get yourself confidence. Be confident. And at the same time, know where your confidence comes from. Okay? So are there any questions? Yes, confidence comes from Hashem, yeah. So we know that we're not perfect. We know that it comes from Hashem. And at the same time, but we do know that Hashem is perfect and no human being is perfect. So we can have the right understanding of how things have to be. And ultimately, this is where Jewish people are not arrogant because Hashem is the God of all people, even of the tree. And so everybody and everything has a place in God's world. We're here to inspire everybody else. We're here to help everybody else get confident. In fact, the Rebbe said that in our generation, one of the main missions is self-esteem. Because the Yetzer Hara puts people down. A lot of people, unfortunately, are killing themselves. They literally don't have good self-esteem. That's why some people, Islam is the fastest growing religion, because unfortunately Islam has a lot of, I think it would be arrogance, not confidence. But it's attractive to some Westerners. They don't have any confidence in their own way. They don't have confidence in themselves. And suddenly somebody comes and says, this is the way. Okay, well, at least he has confidence in himself. They asked the
What's happening in Europe right now, basically.
Yeah, 100%.
All the capitals of Europe being
100%.
refused by nations of Ishmael.
100%. And they asked the Kotzkedev a great line. They said, why is it that the missionaries are so successful? You think about it, we came 1,000 years before the missionaries. We're still a couple million Jews. Okay, we don't really proselytize, but still we have a message for the world. Why are they so successful? So he said a great line. He says, they are selling falsehood like it's truth, and we are selling truth like it's falsehood. Okay? They're selling falsehood like it's truth, and we're selling truth like it's falsehood. So guys, let us ask Hashem. Anybody have any thoughts to add onto the subject? We can open the mic. You can share something.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Like you're saying on at the Christian rehab, you learn they were saying how we don't become a God or the concept that God can descend and come into us. But it's from my understanding, Judaism, that's more a Christian concept a little bit because we all have the spark of Hashem in us. Everything does.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that's why with Christians' idea. Like
Right.
he wasn't
Right.
a god. Mashiach
Yeah.
to us, we're not praying to.
Right.
Mashiach's a tool
Yeah.
for the Geula.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so it's nuanced. Everything is nuanced.
I was just trying to. Was
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we don't believe that man is God, but we do believe that, that a man can kind of basically allow God to really shine through. We speak about the Rebbes, that the Rebbes were like a window that God shone through them. And ultimately, that's our goal in life.
to elevate that
Meaning-
spark of Hashem.
Yeah, and ultimately, something that I blogged the other day, which I realized, which I think is a very, very profound idea, you're meant to come to God with your ego. And I was saying this before, I actually forgot this thought, but it's an important thought, which says there's a shar. There are two types of Yetzirahs. There's an ox, I was telling you before about my friend who's very powerful, and then there's a sheep. So some people are like sheep. Okay, I want my pleasures, this and that, but they're wandering. They don't have a lot of power. Other people, they're crazy. Say, wow, this guy's a hooligan. He's never. No, but that guy has so much positive energy, or so much energy, that if you put him in the positive, he can do 1,000 times more than the other guy. And he's more powerful than the other guy. So we're not meant to, and this is the mistake of Buddhism, which is trying to get rid of ego. You can't get rid of ego, but you can bring God into the ego. You can be powerfully connected to truth. And once you do that, you've transformed your ego. It's not that you don't, the Buddhist wants to get, I am nothing, it's just a force beyond me. No, you are a something, and you're never not going to be something, because if you have any drive in you that's coming from ego, what's depression? When the person goes against themselves. But you can connect and ultimately transform, hopefully reach the level of a tzaddik. When Mashiach comes, will be the level of tzaddik, where your real identity is God. And you're operating from that level, and therefore everything you're doing you should be passionate about, because that's who it is. Yeah.
I want to emphasize that we need to learn Tanya, because we all have the Nekudat Eitan, the point of the Eitan in our soul, and it's a pure, זה חלק אלוקא ממעל, it's a pure point, and it shines when we touch it. And when we get it, it shines everything. So learning Tanya and learning more and more every day. Now I'm coming after a Tanya class. And it's like, you see the truth. The Tanya is the truth. It takes all the stories away, and you see the divine soul, and you see all the klipot, everything. And it's funny, there was today she emphasized, my teacher, about the difference between Chabad and even Breslev. And all the Breslev girls were like, why are you saying it? And in the beginning, and she said, now why are you shouting? Why are you saying this? This is the Yeshut. And she gave a joke that there was a Chabad, and Rav Moyal gives a lot of jokes. So she gave a joke suddenly and said, I'm going to pass it to Rav Moyal. I told her about the Anava and that we talked yesterday on the Gava, and she was emphasizing it, the Bitul and the Yeshut. So she said the Chabad and the Breslev is, or some other, I don't know, Litai, are meeting, and one said, I want to be a big in the Torah. And he said, no, I want to be Bitul. I want to be as small as I can. So this is the difference. A Chabad wants to be Bitul. He doesn't want to be a big, some big, and others, I don't know. But this is the point of Chabad, to be Bitul to the Rebbe. And when you are Bitul to the Rebbe, you can be the most powerful person in your life. But this is the Bitul.
So I just want to emphasize something on that, which is, again, it's not about being
with the joke, by the way. We laughed because there are so many Breslevs there and so many.
The joke's not with the Breslov. The joke is with the Litvak. The joke is not with the Breslov. The joke is with the Litvak, not with the Breslov. Yeah, the Breslovs have a lot of bittul. But the point that I want to say is that, again, it brings to this. Our goal in this life is not to have bittul. That's not our goal. Our goal is not to be humble. Our goal is to be a powerful soldier of God. And that is humility. In other words, working, and this is a very powerful thing I'm going to teach you. It took me a long time to realize this, and I made a big mistake, and I think I still make this mistake, which is that a man once came, I think it was to the Rebbe Marash or the Mizla Rebbe, he said, Rebbe, I'm afraid that I'm becoming arrogant. So Rebbe says, I want to tell you a story, that in the beginning, when God made the world, God told the Satan to get man to sin. So the Satan said, well, man's not going to listen to me. I mean, it's ridiculous. God tells you something, you're going to... So God said, don't worry about it. He'll listen to you. And the Satan was successful. Then man did tshuva. He says, now, okay, God, you got to take me out of the world. I got no purpose. He says, don't worry. We're going to change your name. Now you're going to be called the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death. Okay, he's got a new name. So then along comes Avraham Avinu. And then he says, Avraham Avinu's in the world. I'm like, I got no purpose here. Made everybody, what? He says, don't worry about it. We're going to give you a new name. You're going to be called the Yetzer Hara. Then God gives the Torah. The Torah is like, everyone's got the Torah. The Torah is the opposite of the Yetzer Hara. God says, don't worry about it. We're going to give you a new name. Now you're going to be called arrogant. So then the Baal Shem Tov comes to the world, and everybody's got he brings everyone to humility. So God says, don't worry about it. We're going to give you a new name. Fear of being arrogant. So he says the fear of being arrogant is arrogance. It is the Yetzer Hara. It is the angel of the death. It is the Satan. Or I'll tell you what it is. Really, there was a rabbi. So the rabbi said, so chase that fear away. Why is it arrogance? There was a rabbi. He became one of the most powerful Chabad rabbis. A lot of powerful Chabad. He was probably the most powerful. His name was Rabbi J.J. Hecht. And, yeah, very powerful rabbi.
What's his name again?
J.J. Hecht. J.J. Hecht. And all the Lag BaOmer Farbrenians, he was the one organizing, did amazing things. So it used to be in the 1940s, the previous Rebbe established this thing called, they would go out to the public schools, they would teach Jewish kids, a lot of Jewish kids in public schools then. And make a long story short, he was the one guy that was too shy to go. He didn't go. Everybody else would go. He would prepare the papers for them. The previous Rebbe called him up to his office and he said 3 words that changed his life. He says, Aniva shaloi b'mekoyma, maybe 6 words. Aniva shaloi b'mekoyma, humility that is misplaced, yisoidasa gaiva, 5 words. The foundation of it is arrogance. In other words, what are you afraid of when you're speaking in public? People are very afraid to speak in public. You're afraid of being shamed. So it's not your humility, it's your actual ego that you're afraid of. So my mother, thank God, is very, very influential, I should say influential, but very great activist, shlucha. And she told me once something that really surprised me. She's known in the Chabad world, one of the most powerful shluchot. She says, I'm very shy, but she has tremendous convictions. She says, I'm doing the Rebbe's work. I have to do what the Rebbe, or she'll go in anywhere. She's like, influences thousands of people. Very, very strong person. She's actually a shy person, but her convictions are stronger than her being shy. So if I'm worried about how I'm perceived, that is also ego. But if my convictions are, this is the mission, that's strength. So it's humbling yourself. You were mentioning before, what about the Rebbe? In fact, it's very important, obviously, to Hashem, but also to the Rebbe, because the Rebbe is the one that's really kind of clarifying to us what Hashem wants us to do, which is reach out to your fellow Jew, bring Mashiach, don't give away land. The Rebbe has the clarity of the package of God and Judaism for us today. He's just giving us, like Moshe Rabbeinu, he's giving you the package deal for what it means, what God wants you to do today. So it's very important for us to be arrogant in this. No, we are the greatest. We have the greatest God, we have the greatest Torah, we have the greatest Rebbe. I'm not saying that to the exclusion of anyone else, because it belongs to every Jew. In fact, it belongs to the non-Jews too. None of our story is our exclusive story. It's the world's story. It belongs to everybody. But we have to be proud about it. In fact, the world is upset with us. They're angry at us for not being proud of it. A friend of mine, some people have mentioned, very smart people, subconsciously anti-Semitism is like, why aren't you grabbing me by my lapel and saying, listen, this is your mitzvah. Why aren't you giving me attention? You want to see children go crazy. Don't give them attention. The Gentiles want us, and therefore if you're a Gentile, I'm talking to you. This story is your story too. It's the story of ego is our story. It's not specifically a Jewish story. Story of raising our consciousness, bringing God into our consciousness, making Him our light. This is everybody's story. L'chaim v'levracha. Okay.